You sit down to tackle a difficult proposal. You write a few sentences, and suddenly you hit a point of friction. The exact phrasing isn't coming to you, and the mental effort just feels uncomfortable. Almost entirely unconsciously, your fingers move to the trackpad, and you open your inbox. You validate this instinct with a convincing lie. You tell yourself that checking a message for just 3 seconds is a harmless micro-break to make sure nothing is on fire. Research in cognitive science shows this brief glance is a biological disruption to working memory, depositing a sticky mental residue that prevents concentration from fully returning. To solve this, we will model this transition tax and build a workflow to rescue your lost bandwidth. We are culturally conditioned to treat checking our messages as a form of neurological rest. We assume looking away from a hard project to answer an easy logistical question gives our brain a moment to breathe. But your brain does not view an inbox as a break. It views it as an entirely new set of demanding inputs that require immediate processing. You do not operate like a computer. A machine can pause an application, run a completely different program, and then resume the first one exactly where it left off. Humans pay a massive transition tax every time we switch windows. Cognitive scientist Dr. Sophie Leroy identified the mechanics of this tax through a concept called attention residue. When you jump away from a task, your concentration doesn't smoothly follow. A chunk of working memory remains anchored to the unresolved context. This background process stays active, continuously draining your capacity from 100% down to 40%. Because of this residue, returning to a complex proposal after opening an inbox means you are attempting to work with a fragmented and degraded focus. To measure the structural damage of this habit, we need to scale this single transition tax up to the level of a full workday. Researchers at the University of California, Irvine, led by Gloria Mark, tracked the specific attention metrics of modern knowledge workers. The data reveals that the average professional switches contexts roughly 400 times a day. You are continuously toggling between spreadsheets, active chat threads, emails, and video calls. Here is the penalty for that fragmentation. When you are interrupted, it takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds for your brain to fully return to the original task. When we realize we are falling behind schedule due to these interruptions, our biological response is to attempt to work faster to compensate. This artificial speed generates measurable spikes in psychological stress and frustration. We are essentially sprinting just to stand still. Treating communications as an ambient activity throughout the day results in a chronic cognitive deficit rather than productivity. In the study of productivity, tasks fall into one of 2 distinct categories. The first is deep work. Deep work is cognitively demanding. It is the focused, strategic thinking that creates value and improves your skills. The second category is shallow work. These are logistical duties, scheduling meetings, replying to routine messages, and filling out forms. For most of us, the inbox is the centralized hub for this shallow work. Indiscriminately mixing these logistical tasks into blocks of deep thinking suffocates your analytical capacity. Treating administrative tasks as a constant ambient background activity breaks the architecture of your working memory. Relying on raw willpower to ignore your phone is rarely enough to overcome the friction of digital triggers. You need an architectural solution. You must implement a system known as the shallow work quarantine. Step 1 is disabling the triggers. You must turn off all visual and auditory notifications from your email and team messaging apps. The inbox must remain entirely closed in the background while you are executing deep work. Step 2 requires establishing specific quarantine blocks on your daily calendar. You assigned exact windows for these logistical duties. For instance, 30 minutes at 11:30 a.m. and another 30 minutes at 4 p.m. Step 3 is executing the batch. During these designated blocks, you do nothing but process administrative tasks. Because you are moving from one shallow task to another of the exact same type, you lower the aggregate switching cost and keep the residue contained. The moment you implement this quarantine, you will likely experience friction. You might fear that ignoring messages for a few hours will make you appear unresponsive to your team or clients. Overcoming this requires reframing what constitutes a genuine, literal emergency in your specific industry. In most cases, true crises that demand an immediate response warrant a phone call rather than an ambient chat message. The primary mitigation protocol is proactively managing expectations. You can adjust your custom status update on your messaging app to indicate you are in a deep work block and will be back at a specific time. You can also add a line to your email signature, state when you process messages, and instruct senders to call you for time-sensitive requests. By batching your responses, you give your colleagues higher quality, thoughtful answers rather than distracted, half-baked replies. You have a finite amount of cognitive bandwidth every single day. Quarantining your shallow work is the primary architectural defense of your deep focus.